And Tammy, you have another strategy to share regarding flexibility, I believe.
Yeah, and this kind of ties into what we were saying about the CPNs and sending out a list to students of the work that they are missing, also with an opportunity to submit that work. And that was a real mindset shift for me as an instructor teaching college survival and success because the way in which I was taught was, well, you have to hold students accountable for meeting deadlines. Meeting deadlines is a part of student success, and you're teaching college survival. And therefore, it is your responsibility as an instructor to make sure that you're holding students accountable to those deadlines. And then, as I was doing my own learning, and then through the course of the pandemic, I really had an opportunity to re examine deadlines and due dates and how we grade on those. And so one of the shifts that I made in the class was still having due dates, but letting students resubmit their work or submit their work late after the deadline and still receiving credit for that. And so when I went back into the D2L shell, I made a change in the way the quizzes were graded, and that I made the quizzes completely untimed. And I allow the student to take the quiz an unlimited number of times. And then I created in the grade book that only their highest grade is included in their grade book. And in part, I think that's really helpful because I had to examine what is my intention with the quiz, right? My intention with the quiz is making sure they learn the material or are able to implement the material that we've covered in class. And does it matter that they got that the first time around? Especially when the content of the class is about college success and how do you approach failure and having and adopting a growth mindset, right? So I wanted to make the quiz as an opportunity to really implement those concepts that we were covering in the class. So quizzes, again, they're open note, they're open book, they're untimed, take them as many times as you want. And as long as you get them in by the last Friday of the term, great. And then I did a very similar thing with assignments as well, so that if students miss an assignment, they can submit it all the way until the end of the term. And so when students get that CPN and they find that they've been missing some of their work, they also have the opportunity to turn in the work. And I found that that's been really helpful at CPN time because in the past, students who were maybe getting a D or an F in the class were really struggling with the idea of maybe withdrawing from the class at that point. And now students are given the opportunity to, turn it in. I'll help you create a plan for how to get your work in by the end of the term and being flexible with that and not penalizing students for that. It really empowers them to be able to re-engage in the class and get the work done and not have their grades suffer for that. So I've seen a lot of students who may have withdrawn prior to this shift in grading stick with the class and get their work in and do really well.
Excellent. So not only the opportunity to turn it in late, but also kind of the expectation or at least encouragement to, yes, do it. Please turn it in before the end of the term.
Yes, absolutely.
I also find that there's less punitive ways or there's non-punitive ways to still use the class as a way to model the importance of things like deadlines and schedules. I mean, there's already an order and flow to the class that the students start to understand, okay, there are expectations of when things need to be completed and whatnot. The grade doesn't have to necessarily be the carrot, or in this case, really the stick, to try to emphasize that, right? The fact that we, ask them to get their responses in by a certain time, to understand the flow of the course and how the modules shift from week to week, that certain things will be accessible and certain things will be, you'll be able to still read them, but you can't post anymore at this point. Already, those are pieces that without having to involve a grade, the student starts to get a sense of the importance of, hey, to be a successful college student, I need to be organized and I need to stay to a schedule. Does the grade necessarily have to be a part of that? Not necessarily. Why can't I introduce that punitive measure in there if there are more constructive ways to help the student learn about the importance of kind of following rhythm and following the order of the class.
And one of the really great things about this class is in the content, we have stress management, we have organizational skills, we have time management. And so there's this natural flow of students learning that material and then being able to implement it. And if somebody has fallen behind in their classwork for whatever reason, they are learning the skills in the class to be able to catch up and then actually apply those skills. And the natural consequence of getting your work in on time is, oh, that's a stress management tool.
That's a really great lesson. Tammy, I was thinking about your strategy of the unlimited quizzes, and I've been incorporating that in my class for some time, but something that I hadn't done, and Roberto made me think of this, is that now I'll go through and scan the attempts, and I'll see students who have made multiple attempts to get to that passing grade. And I will send them an email just congratulating them on their persistence. Like, I'm really proud of you of sticking with it. Like, you didn't just get a 70% to pass. You took it to 100%. You took it to the next level. And I get emails back from students saying, wow, thank you.
I love that idea.
One follow-up question I have, Tammy, about the extending the due date until the final day of the term. That's going to be very helpful for students to get their work in and all. The drawback that I see would be the lost opportunity perhaps to give feedback to that student. And so I'm wondering how that works in that situation. If you've noticed that and those students just don't get much feedback at the end.
Yeah, well, I do provide the feedback. Whether or not they read it, I'm not sure. But one of the great things that PCC has done in the past year or two is extended the access for students to get into their D2L classes. And so now that students have the extended time to access the class, I'm seeing that students are going back in and reading their feedback even after the class is done. And I will get emails from students expressing appreciation, or maybe they have a question about something. So I know at least some of the students are reading that.
Good to know. Thanks. So I'm wondering, as we close here today, do either of you have any final tips or strategies for retaining students? Anything else that you would like to mention before we come to an end?
I'll give you one thing, and I don't know that I have any direct evidence of this, but a few years back, Tammy and I had gotten pretty frustrated with the textbook we had been using for the class, not because of its content, but because of its cost. We made the decision, you know what, we could probably come up with our own, OER web-based materials to alleviate some of the pressure, because I know from terms past, I didn't find out until middle of the term, they hadn't bought the book because they hadn't been able to afford it. And they were just kind of trying to flounder and navigate through the class with that. So I worked with the team at Future Connect, one of our very successful student retention programs here at PCC. And they had developed an OER book for a customized version of this course that they do for their students in their program. And being OER, it was available for me to adapt and work it into our course. We came up with our own materials for this class. We use them differently. I tend to actually have an actual PDF that students can download with all of the content. Tammy has kind of more integrated it into the readings for the modules. But in both cases, we saw an opportunity here to remove yet one more barrier, which could have an impact on retention or on the students' ability to succeed in the class by making the materials that the students engage with in the class freely available. So if a tip that I could give instructors is, consider adding materials with open resources to the extent that you can. I would say that that's definitely another approach that we took in helping with student retention.
That's great.
One thing that I started doing was including a copy of my syllabus in the faculty course details page. I housed it in a Google Doc that then I just copy and paste a link to my class syllabus And then I put it in my course details page so that any student who's looking at the class to see, is this class going to work for me? They can click on the link to my syllabus, and then they can see all the course expectations. They can see information about deadlines, about time commitments, things like that, to help them really make an informed choice as to whether or not they want to take this particular class at this particular time with me as their instructor. And I think that's been really helpful. And I have heard from students that they chose my class because they could actually read the syllabus ahead of time.
That's a great idea. Thanks for sharing that.
Yeah, that's great. We can be as transparent as we can to our students and let them know what they're getting into, and then they're going to be more prepared as they enter the class. Roberto and Tammy, thank you so much for sharing your strategies for retaining students. This has been a very valuable conversation.
Yes, thank you. We really appreciate it. It's great.
Thanks for having us.
Thanks for having us. You're welcome.